I've run quite a few Spartans in my life, and I'm surprised I haven't talked about it sooner. I guess I've just had no good way of documenting it in a video format, but with my recently acquired GoPro, it felt like it was about time. I don't always do sprints, but it seemed like a good place to start. We start at the start. The only problem that I have with starting Spartan races is starting so far back, but I guess I'm mostly to blame for that. Once the crowd breaks up, it's really easy to reach a pace you feel comfortable at. I generally run races faster at the beginning, and this race is no exception. Which brings me to the first obstacle, a wall! Which wasn't really that much of a challenge. These only become difficult once your arms are really tired, and unsurprisingly mine are not. Yeah. Then we approach the hardest obstacle in this entire race. And it isn't even an intentional one. The mud. Before this race, I thought sand was the hardest material to run through. I now know that it's mud. You lose a lot of energy in the sand, but mud is much worse. Not only do you lose energy from a lack of friction, your shoes also gain about 2 pounds of mud. That is an absolute pain to get off. I mean, it's been about 3 days since I ran this race, and my shoes still have an absolute ton of mud on them. Over the course of this race, this is what killed me. The additional weight doesn't seem like much, but after 4 miles, it really takes a toll on you. I'll talk about this more later, though. The actual second obstacle was this climbing wall. It's easy for me because I don't weigh much, but if you're not careful, it's really easy to slip up on. Then there's the infamous barbed wire crawl. This was one of the easiest ones I've ever done. They were really high and it wasn't exactly long. I just rolled until it was over. Up next was the sandbag lift. This seems like it would be hard for me because I'm light, but because I weigh more than the bag, it's still manageable. The hardest part of the obstacle is not dropping the bag or getting rope burn. After that, there was this cargo net wall. At this point, I was really starting to feel the effect of the mud beforehand. I stopped at the water station because I couldn't remember drinking before I started, and that's kind of important. There was then running, then more mud, then more water, then more mud, and you guessed it, more mud. I think you can see what I was talking about earlier. This wooden post can be a lot harder than you think because you can't use your legs as much, and I had a complication with my GoPro, but in the end it only took 2 tries for me to get up and over. Then there's the spear throw. It's simple. You either get it or you don't. Don't overthink it. I didn't. I then attempted to fix my mud problem, but it was of no use. The monkey bars are something you always underestimate, but up next was the most unexpected obstacle I've ever met. A cactus. On this steep uphill, I didn't think to look for cacti. I guess I just didn't expect cacti on the course. Before I even had time to react, I had stuck my hand into a very spiny cactus. I now know how it feels to stick my hand into a cactus, and I wish I never would have learned. There was a sandbag carry after that which felt like nothing, especially when the only thing I could feel at that point was the pain in my hand from that stupid cactus. Another cargo net climb, not too hard, and then a lot of downhill. And in most Spartan races, for every uphill there's a downhill, and every downhill there's an uphill. That's later on though. Next, there were the rings. Once you get into a rhythm with these, they're easy, but if you don't, they're near impossible. I got lucky because I was very close to falling on the last one, but just barely managed to get past it. Waist deep water is always deceiving because you go through it and think, that wasn't too bad, and then you see this. Going underwater isn't bad, but going into shock from the cold temperatures is, so you want to get out of there as fast as possible. This rope climb isn't any challenge unless it's covered in mud, which it was. After seeing some people slip, I made sure to be careful and did it with ease. Next was that uphill I mentioned earlier. I've run enough to know that you do not run uphill unless you absolutely have to. Just go at a consistent pace and it'll be over in no time. Here comes the bane of my existence. The bucket carry. I'm fine with something that's really heavy for me because I understand that you have to make it challenging for everyone. The main problem stems from the fact that there are 0 permitted ways of carrying the bucket that aren't incredibly uncomfortable. And I'm not talking about stub your toe uncomfortable, I'm talking about I still have cuts on my arm from this carry 3 days later uncomfortable. This bucket carry in particular was about 50% longer than any other one I've ever done. If this part was completely removed, it would probably be more accurate to how the obstacle usually goes. By the last 100 meters, I was so sick of it, I just sprinted and dropped my bucket. When I saw the rope climb, I didn't even think of doing it. More burpees for me. The sled pull wasn't too bad, I just wasn't really thinking straight at this point and just wanted to finish the race. This overhang was awkward and I nearly lost my GoPro in the process, but I didn't care because I was almost finished. I didn't realize until I was fully up and over though. Finishing a Spartan always feels good, but I already knew I didn't do too well. I don't mind in being in almost the most competitive age group. If I did, it would be setting myself up for disappointment. This was one of those races that always seem better a couple days later than they were in the moment. If it was a super, I think I would have liked it more because there aren't any other options, but after running a stadium sprint, I don't think any outdoor sprint will compare. I would recommend this race only if you've never done an outdoor Spartan and are already planning on doing a super. It'll give you a nice idea of how a super will feel, but otherwise I wouldn't recommend it. I'd give this race a 4 out of 10. It's below average, but it was still doable. I just wish the conditions were better. The mud alone was an absolute pain, and the real pain from the cactus didn't help earlier. If you ever want to try a Spartan, I would 100% recommend doing the nearest stadium sprint. It's a great example of the races at their best, and if you really enjoyed it, I would recommend doing a super or maybe even going for a trifecta. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.